received their complete bios with your registration, so I will give a brief overview and then ask them to share their career story path. Joining us today are Jenine Rabin, Executive Vice President of Johns Hopkins All Children's Foundation. Jenine has over 24 years in the profession and has experience in fundraising with the Smithsonian, the National Zoological Park, and other universities and museums. Marion Yongue is a member of the University of South Florida Foundation leadership team. He has over 20 years of personal experience in the areas of major gifts, estate planning, nonprofit management, and donor-focused fundraising, along with extensive volunteer experience in the field. And finally, Dr. Stacy Baier has over a decade of experience in foundation development and capacity building, and is currently the CEO of the Pinellas Education Foundation. She has held numerous leadership positions at state and national levels, including chair of the Florida Education Foundation Board. To get us started, I would like for each of our panelists to share their career path story. First, let's start with Marion.
Well, and I'll try and make this as brief as possible because I have been doing this a long time, and it's a privilege to do the work that we do. And, you know, working for Moffitt Cancer Center, WEDU, and finally my alma mater, I feel like I've come home to a place that I belong. And but I would say I always want to remember all the members of staff and the donors that I've worked with. And it has been an honor and privilege to work with all of them. And just very thankful for the work that I'm able to do. I'm paid actually to come in and do this every day. And I'm so thankful to be able to do it. So thank you one and all for being here. And I hope you enjoy today's presentation.
Thank you, Marion. Jenine, let's go to you next.
Good morning, everyone. It's great to be with you, and a real joy to talk about career development in this special profession that we've all selected. So probably the way to summarize my career path is that it has been eclectic. I have always been a professional fundraiser, but I have not stayed in one particular industry. So I started my first job out of college, was working at the Kennedy Center as a grant writer, and then really followed a path that went back and forth over the years between higher education and cultural organizations. Medicine always kind of scared me. I always thought that some of the best fundraisers in the business and some of the most challenging work was really done in medical fundraising, and I avoided it, to tell you the truth. I had some recruiters call me over the years, but it really took one call from a colleague that I had worked with years prior, really challenging me to think about medicine as a path, and I have never looked back. So 8 years ago, I joined Johns Hopkins All Children's, moved here from Washington, D.C., and just have been so honored and blessed to work for advancing the healthcare of our kids, not only in our community, but beyond. So you'll probably hear that eclectic path theme come in some of my comments later as well. But again, really great to be with you today.
Awesome, Jenine, and thank you. And Stacy.
Hi, everybody. I'm the exact opposite of eclectic. I've sort of stayed on the straight and narrow and been in education almost my entire career. And I'll tell you, I fell into fundraising. There may be others on this call, but I graduated from college 4 or 5 recessions ago, and I pretty much was desperate to take any job that I could get. I always knew I wanted to work in education. And as my kids will tell you, over the last few months of homeschooling, I was not cut out to be a teacher. So it was very fortunate that my first job was working at the Hillsborough Education Foundation, where I got to help bridge sort of private community resources with public education. And I immediately found my passion purpose, and I have stayed kind of on this trail. I have worked in higher ed fundraising, which for me was not, I was working at a private institution, and it was a little bit more challenging for me for a variety of reasons. The need case wasn't as strong. I've worked in statewide membership organizations. I actually spent 8 years working at a foundation, so on the grant making side. And then, but I always knew I wanted to eventually land back at either the Pinellas or the Hillsborough Education Foundation. So a few years ago when the job here became available, I put my name in the hat and very fortunately landed back here. But I think the other thing that's sort of a thread throughout my resume, with the exception kind of this spot, and it's been interesting, is I've always been in startups. So I've always been in organizations that, you know, I was like the second employee. So the opportunity to really imagine what it was going to become and be a part of sort of laying that initial foundation, I think has been key to kind of keeping my interest.
Awesome, Stacy. Thank you so much. As you all can see, we've got a very diverse panel to share with you today. You heard my credentials from JL at the beginning of our conversation. And I can just add to that fundraising is actually my second career. I did not start fundraising until I was the age of 40, which was 23 years ago. So my first foray into the workforce was as an entrepreneur. I started 2 companies of my own, and during that time launched 2 not-for-profit foundations, which is kind of what got me spurred to join the sector as a fundraising professional. So, so you've got a lot of diverse backgrounds to draw experiences from as we go through our time together. I encourage you to take advantage of the cuts and bruises and scrapes that we've gotten, and those moments of celebration where you do turn in that $1.5 million grant or that ask, and it actually comes together, and it's a very exciting time. So throughout this diverse group of experiences are great things that we can share, and I hope that you're able to at least extract a piece or something that you feel of value from our time together. So let's get started on our questions. I'm going to start. Our first question will be to Jenine. And the question is, how are you instilling stability and confidence in your team to continue performing at such an uncertain time? Jenine?
Thank you. To say it's an uncertain time is probably minimizing things. While I too have gone through a variety of world events and recessions and things along that nature in my career, this has been unbelievable, just in really trying to think about how we do our work differently, how we motivate our teams differently. And when I think about how to keep the team on track, this is probably going to sound pretty basic, but to me, it's about communication, connection, and transparency. So as much as possible that we can be interacting with a team remotely, and not overload. I'm not talking about Zoom for the sake of Zoom. I'm talking about thoughtful, either personal connections or group connections, where we're trying to emulate that in the office feel as much as possible. And then connected to, sharing content. We have the advantage as leaders to be a part of conversations that are insightful to the directions that we'll be going in the future as an organization. So trying to, figure out the right balance of what to share when with the team and make sure that people feel like they understand big decisions. So I'll use an example. Johns Hopkins All Children's has been on a reduced work scenario for almost 2 months now, where different members across the teams everywhere, foundation, other divisions, have taken a reduced work schedule because of our budget impact. As soon as we started really thinking through that, I wanted to bring that to the team and talk through the scenarios so people had time to process. So it wasn't just an issue of one day called to a meeting and the next day you are impacted. We don't always have that ability as leaders to create that cushion and that process time for the team, but if I can find it, I try and find it. And and communicate like that.
Thank you, Jenine. Stacy, what about you?
Sorry, I have to move from my notes to the screen. So I would build off of what Jenine just said around the transparency piece, and also listening, you know, and sort of recognizing the concerns that my employees. I think as a leader, it's this has really stretched me from the perspective of I probably don't do well in emergency situations, is what I'm learning about myself, because I naturally sort of lead with like a longer term vision, but also recognizing kind of how I approach things is not always the one and only way. So it's really stretched me to kind of embrace the ways that my different staff and hearing from them and being more inclusive in some of our decision making to make sure that they feel safe and heard, and know that we're taking their thoughts into consideration. I think the other piece is, you know, once I sort of moved out of the COVID fog of the first, you know, 7 to 10 days that we were working at home, I realized that we needed to change our mindset. I needed to change my own mindset, and from letting me be overwhelmed, which was dragging me down, and, you know, maybe the organization a little bit, to being energized by what was possible, and really embracing staff and celebrating the kinds of new approaches to the work that they are embracing, and, you know, maybe being over congratulatory at times in terms of you know, the opportunities that they're really seizing, because it, you know, it's interesting out of COVID and some of the recent events, it's causing us to think and approach things differently, which quite frankly, I'm not sure we needed this to be happening for us to do that. And then the last thing I'll say is, you know, so much of what we're seeing is what the Education Foundation was put in place to do. So reminding our staff of the great work and the difference that they're doing, and how we've always been focused on issues of equity. This is our 32-year history, and, you know, being really specific and reminding them of how they're making a difference each and every day. And, you know, being able, an education foundation like ours is set up to be able to, you know, pivot. We work with a huge bureaucracy. They can't move as fast as we can. So when needs emerged, we can rally the private sector and, you know, receive the donations that are needed to help in that quick and impactful way. And so I believe, Julie can attest, whether or not she agrees with me, but, you know, I think we're pushing through successfully with a focus on making sure that people are feeling safe and secure in these times.
You bring up a good point, and that is stay focused on the mission. Mm-hmm. And keep doing what it is that you were meant to do in the first place. That will always carry us forward. Marion, let's hear your perspective.
Sure, and I'd be curious what my teammates might say in terms of what I'm doing that's helping them. But you know, kind of to reiterate some of the things you've already heard, communication is key. It's important in the work that we do, regardless of this situation. And it's key, I think, to try and meet our team members where they are. And again, it's a little more difficult in this day and age of Zoom. I would say that's probably not the place that I want to be, but I certainly understand that's what we have to work with. But again, trying to communicate with people as much as we can, and that fine line, again, between too much communication and giving people enough of what they need to do their job. And again, kind of the transparency issue, again, trying to be, you know, presenting information and facts, the reality of what we're all going through, listening to the employees and, you know, responding appropriately. And again, not trying to, you know, provide a sugar-coated version of the world, but really trying to be realistic and thoughtful. And again, how can we approach this all together to do what our mission is? And you know, again, to be part of a university that is addressing some of these issues, whether it be COVID or equity and inclusion. Those are things that this university is always a part of. I'm not saying we're perfect and that we have all the answers, but again, we've been on the front lines of providing some of the care, providing some of the answers to these questions and problems and issues. So again, it's a wonderful place to be, where again, the work that we're doing is actually addressing some of the issues that all of us are facing. So I'm very, again, I always look to my employees to tell me if I'm giving them what they need to do their jobs. So.
Excellent. Thank you so much. So our next question, Stacy, will come to you first. The next question is, how has having a mentor or strong relationships with other nonprofit professionals helped you advance your career?
This is probably the most important element for me for advancing my career. I will tell you that I started my career at the Hillsborough Education Foundation working for a man named Terry Baier, and when he left the Pinellas Education Foundation, I replaced him. And it was his initial guidance. So first of all, I think it was really important that I got exposed and connected to a nonprofit sector that I felt really passionate about. But there are still things that I consider in my daily work. There are quotes that I'll use, like, it doesn't matter how bad you mess up, it's how you fix it. And I remember him saying that to me and sort of applying that to the work. I learned some good and some bad from my mentors in terms of how I wanted to behave, how I wanted to interact with different folks. There are people on this call. I mean, I call Jenine Rabin all the time to ask her for advice on, particular issues that I'm not an expert. I think sometimes people think that when you get to the role that, a high level development role or leading a CEO, as a CEO, you've arrived. Heck no, I've never been here before, actually. I need help. I need people who, and you have to be, as a leader, I think you have to be willing to be honest with yourself. Like we're going to be going out for a search for a position that I don't have an expertise around. And I'm going to have to bring together other people in the community that I know do to help me make a decision around some hiring. So finding those people that you can have that honest conversation with. I mean, there are times when I go and I present a situation to a colleague, to a mentor, and, ask for that feedback. You need people who know you and who can guide you around, how to make improvements in the way that you're working. The last example I'll give you is in this COVID scenario, when I was doom and gloom, I reached out to a board member and I was like, am I approaching this right? What am I missing? And honestly, I was really far in the weeds. And he said, pull yourself up and start thinking about how will the Education Foundation be better and different 2 to 3 years from now because of what's happening. And all he had to do, I felt like the weight of the world was lifted off my shoulders. And I stopped being so worried about the minute stuff. And it needed to be someone on the outside sort of pulling me in. So I love this question. It has been absolutely essential to my success in the trajectory of my career.
That's awesome. Great advice, Stacy. Thank you. All right, Marion, talk to us about mentors.
Well, and I guess the issue for me is I've never called anybody my mentor. But I'd like to say that I think a lot of the people on this call are mentors to me to this day. They're people I rely on. And again, I think it goes back to the work that we do. It's about strong relationships, and that's how we're successful. And again, to me, success in the fundraising area, philanthropy, it's partly, again, it's the relationships I've developed with so many people on this call. And again, you all know who you are. I can't appreciate you enough for all that you do to help me. And again, to be able to pick up a phone call and to ask somebody about a gift planning vehicle and to know that they'll have your back and give you the right answer, not the textbook answer, but again, to provide you with guidance. And particularly in terms of career development, having that kind of storehouse of knowledge of people that you can call and say, oh, this job looks really interesting. Somebody approached me. what can you tell me about this organization? Is this a really well-run organization? What can you know, kind of beyond what we put up as a marketing piece to promote any of our jobs, what is the real nitty-gritty of what is going on? And again, I learned so much from my peers, the people that supposedly I'm leading. Sometimes I think they're leading me. And I'd also like to say again, our donors and volunteers, sometimes they're the kernels of knowledge, the nuggets of wisdom that they provide are invaluable. And again, you couldn't put a price on that. And the fact that some of those relationships I've had over 20 years, again, donors that they didn't follow me, they just happened to be supporting 3 organizations that I ended up working at. And again, they were there already. And, you know, again, it was a kind of a nice landing spot for me to be able to have that comfort of already knowing some people there. So again, not a textbook answer, but again, relationships are key to everything that we do in our work and in our professional development.
Well said. It is all about relationships, whether it's a donor or our team members or other people that we're interacting with. And mentors and strong relationships come in a lot of shapes and sizes. Sometimes they're not even obvious, but later on, I think, oh my goodness, I learned so much from him. So absolutely. Jenine, let's hear your take on this.
So similar to what you've heard from Marion and Stacy for me, but I think I've really grouped people like unknowingly into 3 buckets in my career of just support, advice. And so there's the coach group, and I'm pretty formal about the people who I invite into that space, people who I ask to be my coach. And I've had a career coach, I've had a life coach, and I'm very intentional by wanting a person, selecting a person, and then really going deep with that person around some things that I want to work on professionally, personally. So there's sort of that realm of people. Second bucket is like the advisor and mentor group. And that is very much what, you know, Marion and Stacy were talking about, that here, you know, the 2 of them, I have current and former colleagues who are on this call who fall into that category. Many of my trustees, current and former, bosses. And then I'd say my last category are really like what I'd say are muses in my life, you know, people who I really draw amazing inspiration from. And those come in the form of donors, patient families, when I was in higher education, students, colleagues. So I really need to be inspired by my work, and I usually am. I select organizations whose missions speak to me, but I have to tune into that mission in ways that are intentional. And I come across these muses that do that for me, and rejuvenate me to do the work, I guess I'll say. To touch just briefly, you know, every major career move that I made has been because of a relationship I had connected to that. So the opportunities presented themselves, and within moments, the dots connected kind of serendipitously. So I say that because I think it's so important that you never know who's going to connect to what in this career field that we're in this world that we operate in. And I think if you're always operating with, you know, your character and your professionalism, then that will speak for itself, and you will, those dots can connect for you. So just, I think, keep that network strong is what I would say.
That's great advice. Thank you so much. All right, so here's a really interesting question, particularly in a profession where at times we have been known as in the sector as moving around a lot and changing jobs after 2 or 3 years. So how do you balance the need for longevity in a role with the need to advance? And if possible, particularly in small organizations where you may not have that clear advancement role. Like there may be a big step between where you are and where you want to be. So Marion, I'm going to start with you.
All right, and I'll try and do my best to answer that question. I've been fortunate to work at large, I think small and medium, or at least it was medium at the time of my tenure at Moffitt. It was not the powerhouse that it is today, but I would say it is, something I always try to be cognizant of, because again, on the other side of looking at resumes and seeing how long people have been at an institution, or any job, I think it speaks well if there's at least a little bit of a tenure. And again, I've always tried to measure, again, my enjoyment of a job, but also there's no perfect job. I've always, again, if we've got to think about the long term, the fact that I'll probably be working another 20 years and I don't want to be burning bridges and, hopping from one job to the next, but I also want to have that personal fulfillment and joy. And so I think I've been very careful in the jobs I've taken, and I've been lucky. Again, we can make all the plans that we want. It's like making all the asks that you want. And again, you can do everything correct, the cultivation, you can get the proposal ready. But sometimes just being lucky is, a good thing. Again, preparation is great. Do your homework. Try to find a good place to land. And again, I look for opportunities when I'm in a role to how can I grow? Again, it's not always something with a new title or necessarily some formal change to your job description, but looking for ways that you can continue your own personal growth and professional growth. I think that's important, and it also has to be somewhat self-driven. I don't think large or small organizations have all the resources to put in front of their employees to help them become better. It varies, again, I feel very, very fortunate to be at USF, where I think they invest a lot into their employees. But again, you have to be somewhat self-directed and choosing your options, taking advantage of strategic opportunities. And so again, it's not ever a perfect world, but I think again, you need to plan for as best you can and take advantage of those opportunities as they're presented to you. So maybe not a good answer, but it's my answer.
Your answer is an excellent answer. Thank you. Okay, Jenine, let's hear about you.
So I think starting, I think it's important for our profession that we are clear communicators and strong writers. So I would say right off the bat, if this is a profession that people want to pursue, constantly enhancing those two skills, either through classes or workshops or training or practice, is kind of fundamental to me, because I tend to find that when staff have those skills, opportunities open for them, right? So you're a quick writer, a strong writer, a clear communicator, a strategic thinker, projects kind of become available, and a team member's alignment to those projects starts to happen. And so I think that's kind of point one. I think just enhancing those skills and then looking when you're in an organization for the right opportunity to kind of raise your hand, not wait to be selected, but raise your hand and take a chance on a project that might scare you a little bit, or a prospect that might scare you a little bit. I think that is when we end up doing our best work and growing the most. Then I would say after that, I think personal career mapping and organizational career mapping is important. So having a solid sense in your mind of where you're trying to go and why, and that's not always crystal clear. I think that needs to be revisited often, because interests change, life changes. So when can you be kind of adjusting that map? Also, hopefully your organization is thinking about this for you as well. How are they career mapping you to not lose you? I've been in organizations who've done this very well, organizations who've done this horribly. you know, I have some current and former colleagues on this call who have kind of seen our evolution at Johns Hopkins All Children's on this matter. And I think we are finally getting it right from a career mapping standpoint. So a person can see if, let's say, they join us as a coordinator, what could be a potential path to become a gift officer, a senior gift officer, an assistant director, a director. You know, what does that look like? And it's not a guarantee, but it's a path that they can see. And then I would say we've also invested in training. We've had to pause that training as of the last couple of years because of some budget constraints we've been experiencing. But kind of in normal times, we invested in what we called a major gift fellowship program, where we had staff who were wanting to take the next step in their skill development, and then had intense coaching as a cohort and then individually, and growing into that work as a major gift officer. I know Taylor Traviesa is on the call. She was in the first class of gift officers that went through this program. And I think we really saw, you know, when you take a look at the metrics, we saw incredible development that happened in each team member. I think that helped at the time with retention and investment in staff. And, you know, while I ultimately want to see the talent stay at Johns Hopkins All Children's, I'm also excited when we're able to add to the profession. I believe real strongly in having good, solid gift officers out there and not charlatans. So if we could be investing in that in some way, that is awesome. So I'd say, you know, get the skills, the basic skills of the communication and the writing in place, and then career map and invest in training.
Excellent. And you bring up a point about the scary times. The scary times are the times that make you grow the most. And this can be a scary time. So perhaps this is a good time to look at where you want to go, to take advantage of some of the good advice that you just gave. I know that I recall when 9/11 hit, we were within 60 days of finalizing a $1 million Kresge grant challenge period. And everybody said, stop fundraising, stop fundraising, stop fundraising. And I said, we cannot postpone this challenge. We have to meet this challenge and we have to get to our goal. And somehow we did it. I had no idea how we were going to do it. I just said, we can't stop. We got to keep moving, keep the momentum going. So scary times can make you grow. And I sure grew, I'll tell you that. All right, Stacy.
Actually, I think my colleagues covered it very well, so we can move on to the next question.
All right, thank you. Okay, so here's another interesting question. When do you know that it's time to leave a role or an organization? As we piggyback on the back of the balance for longevity, how do you know when the right time it is to make a career change, to make a path change in your travels? So let's start. Stacy, I'm going to start with you.
Well, I had remuted myself.
I
was trying to take a breather for a little bit longer. No, yeah, just being a bit reflective. I think for me, the answer has been when I didn't think I could kind of grow anymore. When and I will say, maybe looping the last question, maybe how I would have answered it, like Marion and Jenine did, is, you know, sometimes when I've been in roles where I feel like I've gone as far as I could go, but for whatever reason I haven't left, I look for other ways to sort of grow myself so that I am ready for the next position. But I think with time and experience, what has happened for me is I've gotten a lot more crystallized about the things that I need in a job and I don't want in a job. And one of the big shifts that I made, quite frankly, and most people in our world won't understand it, but I left a funder. I left a highly endowed funder where there are a lot of people in our world who think that the ultimate destination is to get to the grant making side, to not be on the fundraising side. And if I'm fully reflective on my experience, I think for me, I got to be too far away from the work. And while I knew I was doing good work at Helios, kind of having that honest assessment of, okay, well, and not blaming, it wasn't Helios's fault, you know, not blaming the organization where I was working. That's, you know, it was me really being reflective of what is going to sort of pique my interest and keep me engaged and keep me energized and have me, you know, jumping out of bed at 5 o'clock in the morning and excited to get to the work. And for me, it was getting closer to where the rubber meets the road. So I won't be the teacher in the classroom. Just ask my kids. I'm terrible, but I need to be at a place where I'm bringing my talents and bridging it. And so I think kind of looking internally and thinking to yourself, you know, have I maximized everything I can do in this particular role? How can I try to grow myself? And then eventually you just have to be honest and go out for a new gig that aligns better and supports your growth.
Thank you. And thanks for pivoting there really quickly. Jenine, I'll cut to you now. Tell us about your experience in knowing when it was time to go or not.
So I think a person has to assess life fit. That's one. Second is mission, and third is people who you work with. So what I mean by fit is that, you know, different jobs fit your life at different moments. There's things you have to consider. And these days, you don't have to be thinking about the commute so much, but that is something that you have to consider. You have to think about flexibility, maybe with a work schedule. You have to think about pay. You have to think about title. You know, there have been times in my life that title didn't matter at all, you know, to me. You could, and I'm not saying that it does so much now, but they're literally, when my kids were first born, you could have not given me any title. You could have pretty much said, like, just call her mom and like still give her metrics and still have her assessed, but she's not on any path right now. And that was just my personal experience, because I needed for my life fit to full pay attention to my babies. And then that time they started to get into their groove, and I was able to take a look at my career differently again. So life fit to me is a big one. Mission maybe even trumps life fit, because if I don't believe in an organization, then I do what we do. Now that doesn't mean you lose your way. I mean, we all could be working with and for organizations that go through some challenging experiences. And you have to soul search to really ask, you know, is this the organization that still characterizes those traits that you believe in? And that is not always an answer that comes to you overnight. You know, that's something that sometimes takes some time to process and to think about. But you do have to believe in mission. And then people. I mean, I have got to like the people I'm around every day. And that's not only in our fundraising shops, but in the organization at large, the leaders, the front line, the whoever it is. I mean, and you know, I'm at a place right now where we always say, it's like when you're in pediatric medicine, you're a special kind of person. And so for to be around that energy every day, all those muses, I have a lot of muses to pick from. That matters a lot to me. So I say that, I'm sorry, just to close that out. I think if you don't have those things and you're not thinking about those things, well, I think you need to think about those things. And when your answer at each of those passes is that no, it's time to go.
Good advice. Thank you. Marion, let's hear your perspective on this.
Well, I'm trying to think of a way to expand upon what's already been said, because it's been said so well. But I really wish, you know, there was like an expiry date or something that just would come up and you would know, oh my, you know, like the milk's bad, you know, well, it's time for you to look for another job and you should have this much time to get that next gig. But I think, again, sometimes you kind of feel it in your heart. And again, I can't stress enough, have to do a lot of soul searching because, again, I've been approached about some wonderful jobs, but again, the mission doesn't fit with me as who I am as a person. It's nothing wrong. There's nothing wrong with the organization, the leadership, their dynamic. There's so many different things that are positive, but again, again, trying to fit where you'll make an impact, where you'll feel comfortable, where you can grow. But I think probably one of the areas is, again, if I'm seeing I can't grow anymore and I really need more challenges, and there's only so much challenge that I can do internally and kind of, whether it's getting that next, certification or degree, to prepare myself for the next opportunity. But again, it's something that I've been fortunate. I think I've chosen wisely. Sometimes I wish that the timing had been a little bit different, but again, I think that's part of the process. We make decisions the best way that we can. You do it and then you work it out. And, again, sometimes it's not pretty and nice and clean and neat, but hopefully you learn from it. And then the next time that happens, you can approach it in a different manner. So again, no secret recipe here, but again, it's a lot of soul searching because again, I think we're in the position of, really carrying the mission of our organizations forward, and we take it very personally. And so once you leave it, I don't think I ever really leave any of the organizations, but again, you have to invest yourself in another organization. So it's hard.
Thank you, Marion, and you particularly brought out growth in your comments there, which actually leads us to our final formal question before we open up the chat box for everyone to submit their individual questions to the panel. So this last question is, can you share how an individual can best grow and stand out in their current position for advancement, either within the organization that they're currently in or elsewhere? How do you not only grow, but how do you make yourself stand out so that you're actually getting some attention and have that next step prepared for you? So with this one, I'm going to start with Stacy.
Sorry, I'm moving around on my. We're on number 5, right? Can you share? Yes.
Number 5.
Yep. So I actually would pull in some of the things that Jenine and Marion have said earlier. One of the things that I really appreciate is sort of the self-starter, the self-responsibility, the people that are constantly looking for new opportunities to learn and hone in new skills, and sort of that intellectual curiosity and willingness to kind of, lean on me if I need to bring advice to how to find the information, but, really sorting it out themselves. I also want to build off of something that Jenine said earlier around sort of having a vision for where it is that you are going and being really thoughtful and methodical about thinking about what are those skills that you're going to need to figure out to kind of take you to where it is you're trying to go. And don't be afraid to stretch and try new things, especially if it's super uncomfortable, it's probably where you need to go a little bit. Being one of the best things that I got early in my career was the opportunity to be a jack of all trades. I think going into an entrepreneurial situation where you can't have these sort of segmented jobs, one day I'm a grant writer, the next day I'm in front of the news camera, the next day I'm helping to put together some large special event. So don't feel like you are confined to the, job duties that you have. Look for opportunities that you can stretch, go into if you're in an organization like ours where, 2/3 of our staff are program driven. In Janine's world, it's, interacting with the medical people, and Marion's world is interacting with the faculty at a school who are, putting together become really knowledgeable about those things, find ways to add value, you know, to your organization. And then what I would say is when you go out there and pursue your next career, you actually have a more robust story to tell about kind of the impact that you've had outside of just your description of, you know, director of development, or, you know, director of special events, or coordinator of grant writing. You have a much more robust message. And then the last thing I will say, just in my few years, if there is a particular area that I find supervisors I appreciate as a CEO, is when folks come forward, this is very specific, with knowledge around finance. And a lot of people think finance is not fun and they want to run from it. It's not what they wanted to do. But I'll tell you, when it comes to running a nonprofit, it's probably one of the most important things to understand, the budgeting and expenses and how things are related within that. It's not just enough to sort of raise the revenue and tell someone else to go do it, or take care of it or spend it. But I think coming with that depth of skill. So if you were thinking about something specifically to look at, I would definitely encourage people to consider finance.
That's really good advice, Stacy. All right, Marion, let's hear your perspective on this.
I'll build upon Stacy's comments, because again, I think part of it is kind of pushing yourself to do some things that are uncomfortable. And for most people that know me know that I would prefer to have my teeth extracted than to publicly speak about myself at any way, shape, or form, including on Zoom. So this is very uncomfortable, but again, I hope that the things that I do help me grow as a person, but hopefully help others as well. So I think there's that shared, growth, and hopefully that can help. And I would say, kind of from an avenue of service, that again, the benefits to volunteering at AFP or CGP or some community organizations, for me, serving on the AFP board, the local CGP board, and I would say the national board for charitable gift planners, the rewards are so much more than anything in terms of time or cost or anything. I mean, the rewards to me personally and the growth that it's provided me, I just couldn't put a price tag on it. And I would say, again, kind of looking at some things that from a different perspective, I had the opportunity to serve on a board that handled a trust, and they generally gave out probably $300,000 a year to different organizations, nonprofit organizations. And I was able to participate in the grant, process of selecting, who was going to get the money. There was always so many more needs and wants. And again, kind of seeing it from the other side of the fence, it was a wonderful opportunity. But again, I think trying to push yourself, not always to feel like you're always uncomfortable, but again, if you become too complacent and too comfortable, there's something a little bit wrong. Again, you're not growing as a person, you're not helping your organization grow. So I think, again, trying to push yourself as much as you can.
It seems to be a common thread among us all. All right, Jenine.
The only thing I'd add to this smart thinking from my colleagues is just the concept of, standing up, leaning in, raising your hand, do that, have that self-motivation to do that. I think too often, and there have been moments that I've been there myself in my career, but you almost, people almost fall victim to thinking, I'll be recognized and I'll be called on when I'm needed, and I'll be, my good work will stand for itself and I'll get the next opportunity. There's some of that is real and should be happening, and managers should be tuned in, but there's also that need for people to be showing that self-start and that self-risk. And I think if the two can meet in the middle, then that's when opportunity happens.
Awesome. So we have, we plan to finish this segment at 12:30. It is 12:29. You guys are the greatest. So We have a few more minutes to move into open conversation with our participants. Chandra, do we have any questions?
There is one right now. A question for the group. Is there a poor decision that you have made with a position? What happened and what did you learn from it?
I'll take it if that's okay.
Definitely, yes, please.
Okay, so the answer is yes. And I think what happened is that I was in a situation, it was early in my career, early in my marriage, and we were relocating to a different state because my husband got into graduate school. And so I was feeling this maybe desperation is the word, to get a job quickly. And so in my job search, and I think a part of this was my youth, I didn't understand those three things I talked about earlier. I didn't understand, you know, the belief in mission, the liking of the people, and I lost my other thing. But I just wasn't clear on those things. And I sort of thought that if I worked hard and and the paycheck was good, that was enough. And I quickly learned that that organization just did not align with me and who I was. Thank God. Talking about what I discussed before, because of connections I had at the Kennedy Center, I knew someone who knew someone, and actually I got a call when I was at that job I didn't like when I was 6 months in, and someone said, what do you think about this other opportunity in this new state that you have moved to? And it's not that I jumped, because I learned that I needed to understand what the organization was that I'd be making the move to, and it ended up being the right fit. So yeah, I think I went for reasons of stability and pay and title at a time that I felt like my life was pretty uncertain and I needed to just lock into a job, and that was not the thing to do.
That is really good feedback, because I think a lot of folks will have made those decisions, and that goes into this next question of, could you speak to a time where you had to push your organization to pursue a new type or priority of fund development?
I'll speak to this one, and it probably would be better if Julie spoke to this one, but I'm going to put words in her mouth. So we've been around for 32 years, and there was really a belief in our organization when I joined 3 years ago that you couldn't ask people for unrestricted gifts. And yet it was the #1 emphasis in every conversation around fundraising, is that we needed more unrestricted gifts. So trying to reconcile what that looked like for our group. So I'm just going to give you an example of a strategy that Julie used to kind of bring the group together. So at our board retreat, we brought data around what did our fundraising look like? What is our retention? Where's our money coming from? Oh, the other thing was we weren't doing as much individual fundraising. So, you know, what were our sources? You know, how much was coming in that was restricted and unrestricted? And it really prompted their thinking around what did this need to look like? So within, I don't know, 3 months, we came back with an unrestricted, annual fundraising campaign, a new society that we had created. The timing was perfect because we were celebrating the 30th anniversary of the opening of Enterprise Village, which is the project that got the Pinellas Education Foundation started. And we started with our board members. So how could they not donate to us? And then honestly, they started reaching out to their friends. We probably have, I don't know, maybe 40% of the people who've donated are not board members and then once they started to see that they were having success around this, now, they think they're the most brilliant people on the planet, that they came up with this idea and they can do it. So, but that's been a really important shift for us, because we had a tremendous amount of giving that was coming in that was purely restricted, like lots of nonprofits. And so helping them see what the problem really was, where the opportunities really were, and then getting them engaged. And actually it was a couple of board members who took the leadership role with Julie backing them up to build the campaign.
So truly coming with your facts in place and your backup in order to state your case, so to speak.
Yes.
The next question is, what do you anticipate will be our biggest challenge as we try to move towards normalcy in our fundraising world? Who wants to tackle that one?
I'll say a word or two. I think it is figuring out the right vehicle at the right moment. I think we all have diverse fundraising as a part of our portfolio, whether it's, you know, grants or events or individual fundraising or corporations. And I think the vehicle, whether it's a visit or a mailing, we have to be thinking really creatively around how we deliver it and meet owners where they are. I don't think we're going to be able to drive this to work. That we're going to have to experiment and see reactions from our donors. I do think we have to experiment, and I think that is going to be uncomfortable for a lot of people. I think there are some fundraisers who love change, and then there are some fundraisers who hate change. And I think that change is necessary in what happens next in our work. And that entrepreneurialism and testing is got to happen. So I think that's going to be uncomfortable.
And I'd just like to add, again, I think agree with everything that Jenine said. It's just, again, we are going to be uncomfortable. We won't know. But again, that's part of the exciting part of it. We're kind of building something new. And there's a lot of opportunities. I mean, people that we could never have real connection with because of distance. Again, they don't want to come across the bay. They don't want to travel at night. Again, as much as I'm not a huge virtual Zoom fan, again, it is allowing more people at the table to participate, to have their voices heard, to be connected with people on this campus that the famous saying is that if it's north of Kennedy, I don't want to come see it if I'm in South Tampa, which presents some problems for us up here at the USF Tampa campus. So again, I think there's a lot of opportunity. But I don't know if we'll have the answer until after we've gone through it. So I don't know what it will all be, but I think it's going to be a lot of trying, a lot of experimenting, and then assessing that and then moving forward. And again, seeing where failures happen, why, and how can we move on from that.
And I'm just going to add really quick that I think we're redefining what face-to-face means. I've built the last 23 years and even before that in my entrepreneurial life, really reading people. Listening is going to take on a whole new level of accuracy, because you can only read so much of someone on a flat screen from the neck up. There's a lot of other listening that happens when you're sitting across from someone in their living room and you're looking at the pictures of their grandchildren, and you're able to take in all those clues and help tailor your message to what they're telling you in many different ways other than just with their verbal cues. So I think listening is one of the biggest skills that fundraisers have to have in their portfolio of abilities, and it's going to take on a whole new level of accuracy and paying attention to people, from my perspective.
That is very good feedback. One additional question. Can you touch on how to ask someone you admire to be your mentor or a mentor?
Anyone like to touch on that? Well, I can share with you that there's a variety of different experiences that I've had, both in asking people to be a mentor and acting as a mentor. on a more formal basis, AFP's Women's Impact Initiative has a mentorship program that was started last year. I was one of the 5 women that were chosen to be a mentor of someone who doesn't even live, my mentee doesn't even live in the United States. And we formed an incredible relationship that still goes on today. So really, I think the key is identifying the commonalities of things that you would like to learn, not necessarily what you already have in common, but choosing someone that could bring you that growth that each of our panelists have touched on today, that provides you with your inventory of things that you would like to expand on. They can help you with that. I would also say that mentors, I said it earlier in our call today, mentors take a lot of shapes and forms. They don't have to be on a formal basis. It could be on a very informal basis and can be a little here, a little there over a course of a matter of years. I have personally charted career paths for other people. I know with my team, every so often I say, what do you want to do in the next 2 to 3 years? And let's chart that path out for you. So it can be, it's a relationship, and this goes back to establishing a relationship in any way that you would normally do that.
I think that is, anyone else want to touch on that before we move on? One comment that did come up that I think is important to mention is that even in healthy organizations, we can't always expect that they will assist with our personal and professional development. And it's up to us as individuals to maximize those opportunities with AFP, with those folks in our community to grow our skill sets. So with that, I do not see any additional questions that have come in. So I will turn it over to you, Kathy.
Well, I hope that you all have enjoyed your time with us today. I had take away a number of things from our colleagues, some of which are relationships are key. Have a vision, map it out. Don't be afraid to stretch and grow. Raise your hand, volunteer, and uncomfortable times are good. So this could be like the perfect environment. It's uncomfortable, right? So time to grow, which I think we all are. I mentioned before the Women's Impact Initiative. I am the chair of our mentorship program on an international level this year. I would encourage you to apply. We have men and women in the program. The women are the mentees, but we have men mentors. So we enjoy everyone and believe in all of the ideals around inclusion and diversity to a great extent. So on behalf of our panel, thank you for attending. Be safe, be well, be kind. And I think with this, we open it up for networking, right, Chandra?